Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing animal welfare laws with lawyer and director of animal justice, Camille Labchuk. Now, Camille, the Ontario government recently introduced a bill to address puppy mills. What is that bill? What exactly is it proposing? And how effective do you think it will be in addressing some of these cruelties that we're concerned about related to puppy mills?
Yeah, so the bill is called the PUPS Act, Preventing Unethical Puppy Sales Act, and it unfortunately, I do want to say I applaud the government for recognizing that puppy mills are a problem, but what they put forward in this bill is not going to tackle that problem. So, Christine, the first thing people need to understand is that one of the reasons puppy mills are thriving across Canada is because no one regulates dog breeding. If the government doesn't know where dogs are being kept and where they're being bred, and again, these are often in people's barns or basements, then no one can go in there and force the laws and make sure that the puppies and the dogs who are used for breeding are actually kept in acceptable conditions. So, what this bill doesn't do, first of all, that's a huge red flag, is it doesn't do anything to track or register or monitor where dog breeding is happening. Anyone can continue to breed dogs without any oversight. So, that's a big problem. It does say you can't breed a dog more than, 3 times within 2 years. It says you can't keep them in really dirty conditions. So there is some good stuff in there, but I'm really concerned that it's going to be unenforceable legislation because there's no way of tracking where these operations exist.
Aren't there already laws on the books that would prohibit confining a dog to an extremely small space, which is one of the problems with puppy mills?
Sadly, there's not in most places. So there's no space limit in this bill or an existing law that would say, like, if you're going to be breeding a dog, here's how much space they're entitled to. Here's how many times a day they have to get exercised. Here's what type of food or veterinary care they should receive. And unfortunately, the PUPS Act doesn't address any of those things either. So I'm really concerned that if this bill passes, we'll be left essentially with the same conditions, with puppy mills operating without anyone knowing where they are, and dogs who don't have to ever get exercise, ever see fresh air, ever frolic in the snow or in a field.
So for someone who does want to get a pet dog, what advice do you have about what they should be looking for, about where they're getting a dog, and how if they want a purebred dog, how to avoid supporting a puppy mill?
It's a really good question because so many of us are dog lovers and want to add those family members to our homes. And I don't think anybody wants to support a puppy mill. So by doing a little research, everyone can have a huge impact on this horrible, horrible industry. So the first thing I tell people is please consider adopting, not shopping. Christine, because of the pandemic, when everyone went out and purchased or adopted dogs, and now people are back in the office, now people have fewer resources because of economic concerns. So many dogs are being given up to shelters and rescues right now. And unfortunately, those shelters are at capacity. Some dogs are just being turned away, and it really scares me to think where they might go. So there's amazing adoptable animals out there right now. These are dogs who, through no fault of their own, are being surrendered. Oftentimes, they are purebred dogs if someone's interested in that. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, avoid websites like Kijiji or online ads for dogs because those are often puppy mill dogs. And if you're speaking with someone about purchasing a dog from them, make sure that you meet the dog's parents. Make sure that you can see the conditions where they're kept. Don't meet them in a mall parking lot. Don't meet them at a gas station somewhere in a rural area. Make sure you can see those conditions yourself.
Now, when you talk about rescue dogs, one of the things that you've been working on is challenging or pushing back, I guess, against a relatively new prohibition on rescue dogs being imported from certain countries. What can you tell me about this prohibition on foreign rescue dogs and what your concerns are with that prohibition?
So, about a year and a half ago, the federal government banned imports of dogs from most of the countries in the world on the basis that there could be rabies in those countries and we could risk bringing dogs with rabies into Canada. Now, rabies is obviously a really legitimate concern. No one wants dogs to get rabies, no one wants that to pass to humans. I'm glad CFIA is considering taking measures about this, but no other country in the world has put a blanket ban on dog rescue in effect. And what Canada is doing is just that. There's not really any exceptions to these rescue bans, even if
Isn't
dogs are
isn't
really.
rabies I mean, my dog has rabies shots. It's completely preventable. Why couldn't that just be the requirement instead of a blanket ban?
Well, that's exactly it. We've all now been through COVID. We know a lot about disease transmission. Dogs can get rabies shots, 100% preventable with vaccines. If there's concerns about improper shots or fraudulent vaccine certificates, the way you do that is you take a blood test and you see if the dog has developed those proper antibodies. You could even implement a quarantine period once they come into Canada and another test and more vaccines. There's lots of ways to address this, but what Canada's done is just a
Hmm.
blanket ban. So, Christine, all these amazing
Right.
rescue groups in Canada that
Right.
work internationally are out in the cold.
We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back.